Every single night he cried, and every single night no one truly heard him. Jason was barely 1 year old and he was drowning in a pain that had no name, no diagnosis, no acknowledgement. It wasn't the kind of pain that shows up clearly on an x-ray or reveals itself through a simple blood test. It was the insidious kind, the type that lives deep within a baby's small, fragile body, silent and relentless, twisting his delicate spine millimeter by millimeter with each passing day. Meanwhile, the adults in his orbit, his father, his longtime nanny, even the pediatrician who had examined him months ago, saw absolutely nothing wrong. The house where Jason lived could only be described as spectacular. A $15 million mansion perched in one of San Francisco's most exclusive neighborhoods, it featured floor-to-ceiling windows that captured breathtaking views of the bay, designer furniture carefully selected by renowned interior decorators, imported marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and artwork that cost more than most people's homes. Everything about the residence screamed perfection, elegance, wealth beyond measure. Everything except the baby. His father, Leonard Turner, was a tech executive who had built his fortune through innovation and relentless work. But after his wife's death, something fundamental had broken inside him. Grief had consumed him entirely, swallowing him whole like a black hole from which no light could escape. Every time Leonard looked at Jason's face, those eyes, that little nose, the way his mouth curved, he saw Maria. His beautiful, vibrant, irreplaceable Maria. So he made a choice, perhaps unconsciously at first, then more deliberately as the months wore on. He simply stopped looking. The nanny, Mrs. Alina Brennan, came with impeccable credentials. 30 years of experience with affluent families across San Francisco, recommendations from Silicon Valley executives and old money families alike, certifications in infant CPR and early childhood development. She knew her job inside and out, or so everyone believed. But somewhere along those 30 years, something had calcified within her. She had stopped seeing children as individuals with unique needs and had started seeing them as problems to be managed, schedules to be maintained, tasks to be completed. To Mrs. Brennan, Jason's constant crying wasn't a distress signal. It was just noise and inconvenience, something to be controlled and, when possible, simply ignored. The pediatrician had been called once, possibly twice in those early months, routine checkups, standard measurements, the usual reassurances. Some babies are fussier than others, the doctor had said with a professional smile. He'll grow out of it. No one had followed up, no one had dug deeper, no one had asked the right questions or looked beyond the surface. And Jason, he kept crying, he kept hurting. He kept waiting with the infinite patience of a child who has no other choice for anyone to truly notice his suffering. Then Tracy Williams walked into that mansion and everything began to shift. She wasn't supposed to see anything. She certainly wasn't supposed to matter. She was just there to clean, to dust the expensive furniture, vacuum the imported rugs, wipe down the marble countertops, and then disappear back into invisibility like all good domestic workers were expected to do. Stay quiet, stay out of the way, and definitely don't ask questions about the family's private affairs. Tracy was 32 years old, a single mother who had been fighting her way through life for as long as she could remember. She had a 6-year-old son named Malik waiting for her at home, a beautiful, energetic boy with asthma that required expensive medication. Her mother, suffering from early-onset dementia, lived in a care facility that cost more each month than Tracy made in 6 weeks. The bills were suffocating, piling up on her kitchen table like an accusation, a constant reminder of how close she was to losing everything. She needed this job more than she needed to be right, more than she needed to speak up, more than she needed almost anything else. This single position, cleaning a mansion for a grieving widower and his infant son, paid more than her previous 3 jobs combined. It was her lifeline, her salvation, her ticket to keeping her own small family afloat. But one afternoon, when no one was watching, when Mrs. Brennan had stepped away and Leonard was locked in his home office, Tracy picked Jason up. Just once, just for a moment. And she felt it. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. His small body was rigid in her arms, tense in a way that made her nursing assistant training from years ago flash warning signals in her mind. Then she saw the mark on his left leg, a deep, dark discoloration just above the ankle, the kind that doesn't come from a single injury but from months of constant, unrelenting pressure. In that moment, everything crystally. Zed, everything made terrible, perfect sense. But here's the thing about truth. Knowing it and speaking it are 2 completely different acts, especially when the people who don't want to hear it have all the power and you have nothing but your voice and a desperate need to keep your job. Before we continue deeper into this story, I want to ask you to engage with this content. Leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, because this is a story about universal human truths, about how sometimes the people who see what others miss aren't the ones with credentials, wealth, or authority. They're simply the ones who care enough to truly look. Tracy's first morning at the Turner mansion started the way most of her mornings began: early, tired, and weighted with constant worry about money. She pulled her 15-year-old Honda Civic into the circular driveway just after 7 o'clock. The house looked even more imposing in the daylight, all that glass reflecting the morning sun, all that space seeming to stretch on forever. She sat in her car for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring up at the architectural marvel before her, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. You need this job, she told herself firmly. Don't mess it up. Keep your head down, do your work, and don't get involved in family business. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of contentment, but the heavy quiet of unspoken grief, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter. Mrs. Brennan had left a detailed list of Tracy's duties on the kitchen counter, written in precise, no-nonsense handwriting. Tracy started there, wiping down granite counters that were already spotless, organizing a pantry that was already organized, moving carefully through the space, trying not to make too much noise. That's when she first heard it. Crying, soft at first, muffled, coming from somewhere on the second floor. Tracy paused, her hand still on the kitchen window she'd been cleaning. She tilted her head, listening more carefully. The crying continued, not loud, not angry, not the robust wailing of a healthy baby demanding attention. This was different. It was sad, defeated, the kind of crying that makes something deep in your chest physically hurt. She told herself it wasn't her business. Babies cry, that's what babies do, it's completely normal. But 20 minutes passed, then 30, and the crying didn't stop. It didn't even change pitch or intensity. It just continued, constant and heartbreaking. Tracy found herself moving closer to the staircase, her heart beating a little faster, her professional boundaries warring with her maternal instincts. She could hear Mrs. Brennan upstairs now, moving around, opening and closing drawers, her voice cutting sharply through the walls. Jason, enough, you're fine. But the baby's crying only got louder, more desperate. I said enough. Tracy's hands tightened around the cleaning cloth she was holding until her knuckles turned white. A few minutes later, Mrs. Brennan descended the stairs carrying Jason. The baby's face was red and swollen from prolonged crying, his eyes puffy, his little chest heaving with exhausted sobs. His body appeared stiff, tilted noticeably to one side in a way that immediately struck Tracy as wrong. The nanny placed him somewhat roughly into a playpen near the living room window and walked away without a word, without a backward glance, without any apparent concern for his continued distress. Jason whimpered, tried to adjust his position, and visibly winced. Tracy watched from across the room, her chest tightening with each passing second. Something's wrong with him, she thought. Something is seriously wrong. That evening, Leonard Turner came home from work. He entered through the front door like a ghost, jacket slung carelessly over one shoulder, tie loosened, eyes distant and unfocused, looking at everything and seeing nothing. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't ask about his day or his son's day. He simply headed straight for his home office, a sanctuary where he could bury himself in work and avoid the painful reality of his life. Mr. Turner, Mrs. Brennan called after him, her tone professional but tinged with irritation. Jason's been fussy again today, quite difficult actually. Should I handle it the usual way? Handle it, Leonard responded without turning around, his voice flat and emotionless. That's your job. The office door clicked shut with a finality that felt almost cruel. Tracy stood frozen in the hallway, vacuum cleaner in hand, watching the man disappear behind that closed door. She looked over at the playpen where Jason sat, quiet now, not because he felt better, not because his pain had subsided, but because he had simply given up. He had learned at barely 1 year old that crying brought no comfort, no help, no relief. Something inside Tracy shifted in that moment. She thought about Malik, about all those nights when he'd had asthma attacks, how she'd stayed up until dawn holding him, refusing to sleep until she knew with absolute certainty that he was okay, that he could breathe, that he was safe. But this wasn't her child, this wasn't her house, this wasn't her family. And if she stepped out of line, if she overstepped her role as just the cleaning woman, she could lose everything she'd worked so desperately to achieve. Around 8 o'clock, the crying started again, louder this time, more insistent. Mrs. Brennan sighed heavily from the kitchen, pulled out her earbuds with obvious annoyance, and started walking toward the playpen with the energy of someone approaching an unpleasant chore. Tracy watched her pick Jason up, not gently, not with any warmth or tenderness, but efficiently, mechanically, like he was an object that needed to be moved from one location to another. You're going to bed early tonight, the nanny muttered, more to herself than to the baby. I've had quite enough of this behavior. She carried him upstairs, Jason's cries continuing, gradually becoming muffled behind a closed door. Tracy stood at the bottom of the staircase, her heart pounding in her ears, her breath coming faster. She knew she shouldn't follow. She knew she shouldn't care this much. She knew she shouldn't risk her desperately needed job for a baby that wasn't hers. But her feet were already moving. One step, then another, then another. By the time she reached the top of the stairs, she could hear Mrs. Brennan's voice coming from the nursery, cold, clipped, devoid of warmth. Stay in the crib, I don't want to hear another sound from you tonight, not one sound. The door opened abruptly. Mrs. Brennan stepped out and found Tracy standing there in the hallway. The two women stared at each other for a long moment. Mrs. Brennan's eyes narrowed with suspicion and something else, perhaps defensiveness, perhaps fear. What are you doing up here? She demanded. Tracy's mouth went dry, her voice came out smaller than she intended. I heard crying, I thought you might need. You thought what? The nanny's voice could have cut glass, that you'd interfere. I just wanted to check on. Check on a child that isn't your concern, Mrs. Brennan interrupted sharply. She stepped closer, her face tight with barely controlled anger. Let me be very clear with you, Tracy. I have been caring for children since before you were born. I know exactly what I'm doing. Jason is fine. He's simply a fussy baby. Some children are just like that. But he seems like he's in pain, Tracy said quietly, her voice trembling. You're the cleaning woman. Each word came out sharp, deliberate, designed to put Tracy firmly in her place. You clean floors, you dust furniture, you do not diagnose children, do you understand me? Tracy nodded, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Good, Mrs. Brennan said, her tone slightly softer but no less firm. I suggest you remember your place. Mr. Turner doesn't tolerate overstepping from staff, and neither do I. She brushed past Tracy toward the stairs, her footsteps purposeful and final. Tracy stood alone in the dim hallway, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Behind the nursery door, Jason had gone quiet, not the peaceful quiet of contentment, but the exhausted quiet of a child who has learned that crying brings nothing but irritation from the adults around him. She wanted desperately to go in, to check on him, to hold him and tell him someone saw his pain. But her feet wouldn't move. You need this job, you can't afford to lose it. Malik needs his medicine, your mother needs her care facility, you cannot afford to lose this job. The mental refrain played over and over as she slowly descended the stairs and returned to her cleaning duties, though her hands continued to shake for the rest of the evening. The next morning, Tracy arrived early, hoping to avoid Mrs. Brennan and any potential confrontation about the previous evening. But the house felt different somehow, heavier, more oppressive, as though the walls themselves were holding secrets. As she cleaned the living room, she noticed things she hadn't really seen before. The mantel above the fireplace held an array of framed photographs. A beautiful woman with dark hair and a luminous smile holding a tiny newborn baby. Leonard standing beside her, his arm around her waist, actually smiling, a real genuine smile that transformed his entire face. The woman appeared in every single photograph, sometimes alone, sometimes with Leonard, sometimes just her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Maria, Jason's mother. Tracy picked up one of the frames carefully to dust beneath it. The photo showed Maria in what must be the nursery upstairs, paintbrush in hand, laughing at whoever was behind the camera. She looked radiant, full of life and anticipation. Oh, she did. All of it herself. Tracy jumped, nearly dropping the frame. Leonard stood in the doorway, his sudden appearance startling her. She hadn't heard him approach. I'm sorry, Mr. Turner, she stammered. I was just. She designed the whole nursery, he continued, his voice distant, as though he were speaking from very far away, picked out every piece of furniture, every toy, every detail, even chose the crib bumpers herself. His jaw tightened visibly. It was the last thing she finished before the accident. Tracy carefully set the frame back down, her heart aching. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Turner. Leonard didn't respond immediately. He just stood there staring at the photograph, his face a mask of emptiness and pain. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Tracy watched him go, understanding crystallizing in her mind. This wasn't simply a wealthy man neglecting his child out of indifference or cruelty. This was a man so utterly shattered by grief that he literally couldn't bear to look at his own son. He couldn't enter the nursery his wife had lovingly created. He couldn't be a father because being a father meant acknowledging he was also a widower, meant facing the devastating loss that had torn his world apart. And somewhere in the middle of all that overwhelming pain and avoidance, a baby was suffering. A baby who had done nothing wrong except exist as a painful reminder of what was lost. That afternoon, Tracy was cleaning near the playpen when Jason started crying again, that same sad, defeated cry that tore at her heart. She glanced toward the kitchen. Mrs. Brennan was on her phone, her back turned, engrossed in conversation. Tracy knelt down beside the playpen, her heart racing. Hey, little one, she whispered softly. Jason looked at her with those red, swollen eyes. He didn't reach for her. He didn't smile. He just watched her with that same heartbreaking resignation she'd seen before, a baby who had already learned not to expect comfort. Tracy's throat tightened painfully. She reached through the bars of the playpen and gently touched his small hand. Jason flinched, not from fear but from pain. And that's when Tracy saw it clearly for the first time, now that she was really looking, really paying attention. The way his left shoulder sat noticeably higher than his right, the way his back curved unnaturally when he tried to sit up, the way even the smallest movement seemed to cause him discomfort. "What are you doing?" Tracy spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Mrs. Brennan stood behind her, her face dark with anger and something else, perhaps guilt, perhaps fear of being found inadequate. "I told you not to touch him," the nanny said, her voice cold. I was just. Get your things, you're done for the day." "Mrs. Brennan, please," Tracy said, her voice shaking. "I really think something's wrong with." "Oh, no." Tracy grabbed her cleaning supplies with trembling hands and headed for the door, her vision blurring with unshed tears. But as she reached her car, she looked back at the house, at those pristine windows, that architectural perfection, all that wealth and privilege. And somewhere inside, a baby was crying that no one wanted to hear. Tracy sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. She thought about Malik waiting for her at home. She thought about her mother in that care facility. She thought about the mounting bills on her kitchen counter. She thought about everything she would lose if she pushed this issue further. Then she thought about Jason's eyes, those sad, knowing, defeated eyes. And she realized she was already in too deep to walk away. "I'll be back tomorrow," she thought, "and I'm going to figure out what's wrong with that baby, no matter what it costs me." Day 3 arrived, and Tracy almost didn't return to the Turner mansion. She sat in her car outside her apartment building for 10 minutes, arguing with herself, weighing her desperate financial needs against her growing conviction that Jason was in serious danger. She needed the money, God, how she needed the money. But she showed up anyway. Mrs. Brennan met her at the door, her expression stern and unwelcoming. "Main floor only today," the nanny said firmly. "You're to stay downstairs, is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Tracy replied quietly. The nanny nodded curtly, then went upstairs with Jason. Within minutes, the crying started, and this time it seemed even more desperate than before. Tracy scrubbed the kitchen counters, trying to focus on her work, trying to ignore the sound, but it was impossible. 20 minutes passed, 30, 45. The crying didn't stop, and she could hear Mrs. Brennan moving around upstairs, completely unfazed. "Jason, enough, you're perfectly fine." But he wasn't fine. Tracy knew he wasn't fine. She gripped the sponge tighter, her chest burning with frustration and helplessness. Around noon, Mrs. Brennan grabbed her designer purse from the counter. "I'm going out for lunch," she announced. "Should be back in an hour, don't go upstairs." The instruction was clear and pointed. The door closed behind her. Tracy stood alone in the vast, silent house, her heart pounding like a drum. She knew she shouldn't, she knew it was a violation of direct orders, she knew it could cost her everything. But she couldn't stop herself. She climbed the stairs, each step feeling both terrifying and inevitable. She pushed open the nursery door and stepped inside the room Maria had designed with such love. Jason lay in his expensive crib, awake, staring at nothing with those heartbreaking eyes. His face was red and swollen from crying. His small body curved to the side in a way that made her stomach twist with alarm. Tracy knelt beside the crib, her hands shaking. "Hey, baby," she whispered, "I'm here, I see you." He looked at her with those tired, defeated eyes that no baby should have. Tracy pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and opened a web browser. She searched, "Baby won't sit straight, infant spinal problems, signs of skeletal issues in babies." The results that appeared on her screen made her hands shake even harder. Positional plagiosophy, developing scoliosis, muscular torticollis. If caught early, treatable, correctable, manageable. If left untreated, permanent damage, chronic pain, potential need for surgery, lifelong complications. She heard the front door open downstairs. Tracy's heart nearly stopped. She jumped up, slipped out of the nursery as quietly as possible, and rushed back downstairs, making it to the kitchen just as Mrs. Brennan walked in through the front door. The nanny's sharp eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where were you just now?" "Finishing the living room," Tracy said, forcing her voice to remain steady despite her racing pulse. Mrs. Brennan didn't look convinced, but she didn't pursue it further. That evening when Leonard came home, Tracy made a decision. She had to try. She had to speak up, even if it meant losing everything. Tracy was cleaning the entryway when Leonard walked past her, phone pressed to his ear as usual, already mentally checked out from his home life. She took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she possessed. Mr. Turner. He stopped, irritation flashing across his tired face. What? It's about Jason, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I really think he needs to see a doctor. His back doesn't look right. The way he sits, the way he moves, something's wrong. Leonard's expression hardened immediately. Mrs. Brennan handles all of Jason's care, he said coldly. She's been doing this for 30 years. If something was wrong, she would know. But what if she's missing something? Tracy pressed, knowing she was crossing a dangerous line but unable to stop herself. What if? Tracy, he stepped closer, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. You're not paid to diagnose my son, you're paid to clean my house. Do your job or I'll find someone who will. He walked away, dismissing her completely. Tracy stood there in the hallway, her throat burning, tears stinging her eyes. She was nobody to him, just another employee, easily replaceable, her concerns worthless. That night she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. On the screen was a number for Child Protective Services that she'd looked up hours ago. Her finger hovered over it. If she called, she could lose everything. Her job, her income, her ability to pay for Malik's medicine and her mother's care. But if she didn't call, she couldn't stop thinking about Jason's face, about that curve in his spine, about the medical article's warning of permanent damage if left untreated. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text, making her jump. It was from Malik's school. Reminder, medication refill needed by Friday. Please ensure prescription is current. Tracy closed her eyes, feeling torn in two. She couldn't afford to lose this job. But she also couldn't afford to stay silent while a child suffered. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow, Mrs. Brennan had mentioned having a doctor's appointment that would take several hours. Tomorrow, Tracy would be alone with Jason for an extended period. Tomorrow might be her only real chance to help him, even if it destroyed her entire life in the process. Friday morning arrived with a weight that felt almost physical. Mrs. Brennan was waiting by the front door when Tracy arrived, her expression stern and businesslike. I have an appointment this morning, the nanny announced. I'll be back in 2 hours, possibly 3. Tracy's pulse quickened. Should I? Jason's in his playpen, Mrs. Brennan interrupted. Keep him there, don't pick him up, don't feed him, don't interact with him beyond what's absolutely necessary, just leave him alone and do your work. The nanny's eyes were sharp, penetrating, almost accusatory. Are we completely clear on these instructions? Yes, ma'am, Tracy whispered. Ed. The door closed behind Mrs. Brennan, the sound of her car starting then pulling out of the driveway. Silence descended on the house. Tracy stood in the entryway, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She was alone with Jason for the first time all week. Actually alone, without the nanny's watchful, suspicious eyes monitoring her every move. She could actually help him now. She could actually examine him properly, see exactly what was wrong, maybe even understand the full extent of his condition. But Mrs. Brennan's warning echoed in her mind. Don't touch him, don't pick him up, just leave him alone. Tracy walked slowly into the living room. Jason sat in the playpen, quiet as always, his small body tilted to the side in that now familiar, heartbreaking way. When he saw her, he didn't smile or cry. He just watched her with those sad, knowing eyes that seemed far too old for a 1-year-old baby. She knelt beside the playpen, her hands trembling. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly. I'm going to help you, okay? I promise I'm going to help you. Jason blinked slowly, neither trusting nor distrusting, simply existing in his constant state of resignation. Tracy made her decision. She lifted him carefully out of the playpen. The moment her hands touched his small body, she felt it again, that terrible rigidity, that tension, like every muscle was bracing for inevitable pain. Oh, baby, she whispered, cradling him close to her chest. What's been happening to you? Why hasn't anyone been taking care of you properly? She carried him upstairs to the nursery, her heart hammering with every step, knowing she was violating direct orders, knowing the consequences could be severe but unable to stop herself. Inside the nursery, she laid him gently on the changing table and began examining him the way she'd learned years ago during her brief nursing assistant training before Malik was born. His spine curved visibly when he lay flat, his left shoulder sat noticeably higher than his right, and when she carefully, gently tried to straighten his position, he whimpered in pain. Tracy's throat tightened. I'm sorry, baby, I'm so sorry. She looked around the beautiful nursery, at the custom crib Maria had chosen, at the expensive bumpers, at the designer bedding, at everything his mother had carefully selected before her tragic death. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. One section of the crib bumper had come loose from its ties. It was bunched up, thick and compressed on the left side, creating an artificial wall. Tracy's breath caught as understanding dawned. If a baby slept pressed against that bunched-up section every single night for months, his developing body would have to adapt. His soft, growing bones would curve to accommodate the pressure. His leg would press against it for hours at a time, night after night, week after week, month after month. She lifted Jason again and gently, carefully examined his left leg. There, just above the ankle, was a dark mark, deep, old, the unmistakable sign of constant pressure over an extended period. Tracy's hands shook as all the pieces fell into place like a horrifying puzzle. This baby had been sleeping in the same twisted position for months, possibly since Maria's death. His soft, developing bones had been adapting, curving, compensating, and no one had been checking on him at night. No one had been adjusting his position. No one had noticed the bunched bumper. No one had seen the mark developing on his leg. "Oh God," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Nobody's been watching you. Nobody's been protecting you." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and started taking photographs, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the device steady. The crib, the bunched bumper, Jason's curved spine, the dark mark on his leg. Evidence, proof, documentation. Then she heard it, a car door slamming outside. Tracy's heart stopped completely. She rushed to the window and looked out. Mrs. Brennan was back early. Panic flooded through Tracy's system. She quickly but gently returned Jason to his playpen, shoved her phone deep into her pocket, grabbed her cleaning supplies, and tried to look like she'd been working the entire time. The front door opened. "Tracy," Mrs. Brennan's voice was cold, sharp, suspicious. "I'm here," Tracy called out, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to control it. The nanny appeared in the doorway, her sharp eyes immediately scanning the room, taking in every detail. Then her gaze landed on Jason in the playpen. He was facing the wrong direction. Tracy had put him back slightly differently than he'd been positioned before. Mrs. Brennan's face darkened with fury. "You touched him. I was just—" "I gave you explicit instructions not to touch him," the nanny said, her voice dropping to something dangerous and cold. "I heard him crying and I—" "Lying won't help you now," Mrs. Brennan pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Mr. Turner, you're finished here." "Wait, please. You've crossed the line for the very last time." Tracy stood frozen, watching helplessly as the nanny dialed. In her pocket, her phone felt like it was burning a hole through her jeans. She had the evidence. She had photographic proof of Jason's condition and its likely cause. She had documentation that could save this child. But in approximately 30 seconds, Leonard Turner was going to fire her. And once she was gone, once she was removed from this house, no one would ever look at that crib again. No one would ever see what she saw. No one would ever connect the dots. Jason would keep sleeping in that same dangerous position. He would keep crying in pain that no one acknowledged. And eventually, the damage would become permanent, irreversible, life-altering. Tracy's hands curled into fists at her sides. She had one choice left, and she had about 10 seconds to make it, 10 seconds to decide whether to protect herself or to protect a baby who had no one else willing to fight for him. "God," she prayed silently, "please tell me what to do. Please give me the courage to do what's right, no matter what it costs me." "Mr. Turner, it's Mrs. Brennan," the nanny said into her phone, her voice professional but tinged with vindictive satisfaction. "We have a serious problem with the cleaning woman." Tracy watched Mrs. Brennan pace the living room, phone pressed tightly to her ear. "She's been interfering with Jason's care repeatedly," the nanny continued. "I've warned her multiple times, but she refuses to listen to instructions. She was upstairs in the nursery when I explicitly, clearly told her not to go up there." Silence as Leonard responded on the other end. "I think it's best if we terminate her employment immediately, today." Tracy's stomach dropped to her feet. This was it, the end of everything. Mrs. Brennan hung up and turned to face her, a cold smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Mr. Turner will be home in 20 minutes. You can wait outside." "Please," Tracy said quietly, desperately, "just let me explain, let me show you." "There's nothing to explain," Mrs. Brennan interrupted sharply. "You don't follow instructions, you overstep boundaries constantly, and frankly, I don't trust you around the child." The nanny walked away, leaving Tracy standing alone in the middle of the beautiful, cold house. 20 minutes, that's all she had left. Tracy looked at Jason in the playpen. He was watching her with those tired, sad eyes that had haunted her dreams all week. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone and opened the photos she'd taken. The crib with its bunched bumper, the mark on Jason's leg, the visible curve in his spine. It wasn't enough, she realized. It wasn't nearly enough, she needed more. She needed someone official, someone with authority, someone who could actually do something about this situation. Quickly, her fingers fumbling, she opened her browser and searched, Free Legal Help Low-Income Families San Francisco. A number appeared, Legal Aid Society. She dialed with shaking hands. Legal aid services, how can I help you? A woman's voice, calm and professional. Tracy's voice trembled. I need help. I work as a maid, and the baby in the house where I work is being hurt. Not intentionally, I don't think, but nobody's seeing it. Nobody's paying attention. I have photos on my phone, but I'm about to lose my job and I don't know what to do. Okay, the woman said, her tone remaining calm and reassuring. Tell me exactly what you've seen. Tracy explained everything as quickly as she could. The constant crying, the curved spine, the bunched crib bumper, the deep mark on Jason's leg that indicated months of constant pressure, the way even small movements caused him pain. Do you have any medical documentation? The woman asked. No, Tracy admitted, her heart sinking. I'm just the cleaning woman. I can't take him to a doctor without the